All right, today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating and rapidly changing countries on the entire planet, El Salvador. We're going to explore how a nation that was once defined by a brutal civil war is now completely rewriting its own story with things like massive gang crackdowns and a world first, all in bet on Bitcoin. Okay, let's get into it.
So our journey starts not in some bustling capital city, but right here, on the sun-drenched Pacific coast in a tiny little surf town called El Zonte. This place, believe it or not, became the unlikely heart of a quiet revolution, earning itself the nickname Bitcoin Beach long before the rest of the world had any idea what was happening.
Because it's right here, nestled between these world-class waves and humble little surf shacks, that a radical economic experiment started to grow, one that would eventually shake up global finance and help redefine an entire nation.
I want you to just picture this for a second. You wake up, you go grab a coffee, buy a fresh pupusa, which is this delicious local staple, you have to try it, and hey, maybe you even book a surf lesson. And you pay for all of it, instantly, just by scanning a QR code with your phone. This is the whole point. Here, Bitcoin isn't some abstract thing you see on a stock ticker. It's just money. It's how the local economy actually runs, day in and day out.
And this is really where the idea clicks into place. You know, forget trying to buy a coffee with like 0.00004 of a Bitcoin. It's confusing, right? Well, here, everything is priced in Satoshis or sats. Think of them as the cents to Bitcoin's dollar. A pupusa costs about 2,000 sats. All of a sudden, this super complex digital currency feels simple. It feels tangible. And most importantly, it's actually usable for just living your life.
So, how did this whole thing even start? Well, the story goes that back in 2019, an anonymous donor gave a whole bunch of Bitcoin to a few locals, but there was one simple rule: build an ecosystem. They didn't just hand out money, they taught shopkeepers how to use the tech and gave small amounts to families to spend. They created a real, circular economy, literally from the ground up. So you've got this cool grassroots experiment in one tiny beach town. How on earth does that suddenly go national? Well, that's the next chapter in this story. And honestly, it caught the entire world completely off guard.
And boom, just like that, it was official. The president, Nayib Bukele, made El Salvador the first country on earth to make Bitcoin legal tender, right alongside the US dollar. This was a massive, massive gamble. The idea was to do a few things: attract foreign investment, get the 70% of Salvadorans who don't have bank accounts into the financial system, and really to fundamentally rebrand the entire nation on the world stage.
And let me tell you, this wasn't just some symbolic gesture. Nope. The country started building up a national Bitcoin treasury, and they committed to buying at least one coin every single day. This is a classic investment strategy called dollar cost averaging. The idea is to smooth out the wild price swings by just investing a fixed amount regularly, no matter if the price is high or low. You just slowly and steadily build up your position over time.
Okay, and this might be the most sci-fi coolest part of the entire story. El Salvador is literally, and I mean literally, using the immense power of its volcanoes to mine Bitcoin. I mean, look at this. A geothermal plant taps into that natural volcanic heat, creates 100% clean energy, and then uses that energy to power hundreds of mining computers that are just churning out new Bitcoin 24/7. It's incredible. So, what about the results from this volcano mining? Well, since 2021, the operation has generated over 474 Bitcoin for the National Treasury. We're talking about a multi-million-dollar asset created entirely with clean, renewable energy.
So who's the architect behind all this change? We'll meet President Nayib Bukele. He's a leader who has almost universal approval at home, but at the same time draws constant criticism from observers all around the world.
To really get why he's so incredibly popular, you have to look at this contrast right here. Before Bukele, El Salvador was a place defined by rampant gang violence and a political system that felt stuck. His government came in and just completely upended that reality. First by crushing the gangs, then by rolling out Bitcoin, and finally by dismantling the old political order, which all led to his historic landslide 84% re-election victory.
But really, if you want to understand the Bukele phenomenon, it all comes down to this one single chart. Back in 2015, El Salvador was basically a war zone, one of the deadliest places on the planet. By 2023, after his state of emergency and mass arrests of gang members, the homicide rate had fallen by over 97%. Now, that isn't just a statistic. It's a complete transformation of daily life for millions of people.
And to really grasp why that transformation, that push for security,
was so welcomed by so many, we have to rewind the clock a bit and look at the deep, deep scars of the country's past.
El Salvador's history is incredibly deep. From the ancient Papil civilization all the way through Spanish colonization and independence. But to understand the country today, you absolutely have to understand the defining trauma of its modern era, the brutal, bloody civil war of the 1980s.
For 12 long years, a vicious conflict raged. The human toll was just catastrophic. An estimated 75,000 people were killed and over 1 million were forced to flee their homes. It left this deep, collective trauma that would really shape the country for decades to come.
And if there's one single event that was the flashpoint, it was the assassination of Archbishop Oscar Romero. He was a beloved advocate for the poor, and he was murdered while he was celebrating Mass. This act just horrified and radicalized the opposition, plunging the country into 12 years of war. And even when peace accords were signed in '92, the violence just changed forms. The gangs that came after, like MS-13, made sure that true peace was always just out of reach.
Which brings us all the way back to today. So after decades of living with that constant fear, what does it actually feel like to be in El Salvador right now? What's the new vibe? Well, the single biggest change, if you talk to locals, is this incredible feeling of freedom. For the first time in a generation, people feel safe just walking down the street at night. Families are taking back public spaces, parks, beaches, even entire neighborhoods that used to be terrifying no-go zones, totally controlled by gangs. It's a psychological shift that has re-energized the whole country. And you know what comes with that newfound safety? A full-throated, passionate return to national obsessions, especially football. Just being able to safely go to a match, whether it's for the national team, a selecta, or a superheated Clásico rivalry game. That's a simple joy that was denied to so many people for years. The sport is way more than a game here. It's like a barometer for the nation's health.
And this is the incredible duality you see in El Salvador today. It's a nation pioneering digital finance, just a short drive away from Joya de Siren, a Mayan village that was perfectly preserved by a volcanic eruption 1,400 years ago. It's a country that is sprinting toward a really radical future, but without ever losing sight of its ancient, fascinating past.
So, after all this monumental, dizzying change, what's next? Where does El Salvador go from here? And that question is right at the heart of the debate about the country's entire future.
Look, the Bukele model is fiercely debated, and for good reason. On one hand, you have successes that are just undeniable, a historic drop in crime and huge popular support. But on the other hand, critics at home and abroad raise really serious concerns about the cost of that security. They point to human rights issues, the erosion of democratic institutions, all while the nation's financial future is tied to the ridiculously volatile price of Bitcoin.
And really, that leaves us with the central question of El Salvador's grand experiment. Is what we're watching a revolutionary blueprint for other nations to follow, a new way to reclaim security and innovate, or is it a massive, high-stakes gamble on authoritarianism and crypto that could all just unravel? For now, the whole world is watching to see what happens next.